Okay, hey everybody. I want to go over a few things today, and I thought I owed you a video, something you can watch, so I can go over a few things. I want to talk first about these first papers that you've already handed in. Then I want to talk a little bit about those essays that you've looked at for homework. Then I want to give you your final research assignment, and I will put the prompt up on Blackboard. And then I'll tell you what we're going to do for homework for this week. Okay, so to start, for these first papers, they were mostly really good. I was impressed. Us not being in the classroom makes it very difficult for us to do this kind of work, but everyone has been doing their work. Mostly everyone, at least, has been doing the work that will get us to where we need to be for this class and to be successful in writing these papers. Some things that I want to point out, things I've already pointed out to you before that are really important to this kind of work, that I think you're doing really well. You're paying attention to what I've been telling you on Blackboard and so forth. Signal phrases, good signal phrases. In your writer's reference, you can find a whole section on signal phrases. So if you get tired of just saying, according to so-and-so, there's a whole list of kinds of ways you can introduce your source. One of the things, though, that I'd like to see done a little bit better is when you're including a signal phrase, you've got your author there. Okay, so we know what that author's name is. And we know what the title of the journal article or the book or the newspaper article, magazine, so forth. We know what that is. So we've got the author's name and we've got the name of the document. What I'd like to see you do a little bit better is say things like, according to New York Times journalist, Max French, in his article, whatever, okay? Just so, and there's a reason for this. Just so we know who that authority is. We know the name, that's fine, but we don't know who Max French really is. In this case, we do know now. He is a journalist for the New York Times. But let's say it's a book. Let's say it's a book. Let me find one. Hold on. I'll find something that works for this. Here. Okay, here's a book called Dreaming of Dixie. Okay, it's written by Karen Cox. And Karen Cox is a professor of history at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So instead of just saying, according to Karen Cox, follow that by a quote or a paraphrase or a summary of what's in this book, it's usually helpful if you can say, according to Karen Cox, a historian at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, quote, whatever. I like what you're doing with those signal phrases and saying, according to Karen Cox in her book, Dreaming of Dixie. But you could also include, according to Karen Cox, historian at the University of North Carolina, whose book, Dreaming of Dixie, discusses whatever. Just give us a little bit more information so we know that your authority, your source, is someone who we can trust to for the credibility of that information. Okay, so work on the signal phrases. You're doing them, you're using them. I really appreciate that. Now, as we move into the last part of the semester, I'd like to see you using them in a little more nuanced way. Now, the next time you use Karen Cox's name, I don't want you to say, according to Karen Cox, University of North Carolina, historian, so forth. You can just say, Cox goes on to tell us, and that can be 2 pages later, or Karen Cox. So So you don't have to give the full description. You can just use the word Cox again. And that way it doesn't get as wordy. Okay, I hope that makes sense. We'll look at a paper, and that might help clarify things. Topic sentences, those can be refined a little bit better. The topic sentence of each paragraph should tell us exactly what's going on in that paragraph. Okay, it's the thesis statement for that paragraph. All right. That topic sentence will help you stay on track for what you're doing in that paragraph, right? Because I have noticed that some people will start off talking about one thing, but by the time we get to the last sentence of a paragraph, we're talking about something completely different. Okay, so I want to make sure that you've got a good topic sentence. This is what's happening in this paragraph. And then following that with evidence that what you're saying is true, or examples of what you're saying in that topic sentence. So I really want to see more, for example, the words for example, because that will key you to providing examples that show what you are saying is true. Okay, so I want to see more for examples, and I want to see more accurate topic sentences at the beginning of that paragraph. I also want to see better transition between paragraphs. So you're not talking about one thing and then all of a sudden you're talking about something completely different. We need to know, it's like you're telling a story to someone. And if you're telling a story to somebody, you don't just start talking about something else altogether, right? You have to, it has to seem seamless. That one idea builds upon another idea, and that those ideas are connected somehow. So you don't want to just switch gears between these paragraphs. You need some transition, okay? And I think if you were to look up transitions in your writer's reference, you're going to see some good ideas how to do that. I don't want to lean so heavily on this writer's reference, but there's such good material here, and you've got it at your fingertips. Use it. We all have done writing before. We all know what transitions are. So just work on creating better transitions. Before I go on, one really good trick is to read your papers out loud, because you will catch problems such as clunky sentences or lack of transition, and so forth. You will catch subject-verb disagreements and bad grammar. You'll catch all of that. So read your papers out loud to yourself, and then revise. I want to see you revising. That's the only way you can write a good paper. Your first draft is not going to be your best paper. It's not going to be anything you want to turn in. It needs to be substantially revised before you do turn it in. First draft is just dumping everything onto the page. Second, third, fourth drafts are working on your ideas, reorganizing things, working on sentences, making things flow, writing good sentences, and revising things at the sentence level. Okay. All right. So following your signal phrase, you need to have some paraphrase or some direct quote or a summary of somebody's work. Okay. I think everybody seems to be doing this pretty well. Make sure though that your quote, okay, makes sense, that it actually supports or is actually doing the work that you need it to do. Okay. If you are arguing, whatever the case may be, but then you've got a quote that kind of seems to work, and you throw it in there, sometimes I'm finding that somebody's quotes are not doing what they need them to do. And it's just a quote from some research, and that it's not actually supporting the point you're trying to make. So make sure that that's happening. Okay, so good. So we're doing good there. I want to see a little bit better research. I realize we can't move around the library as well as we would like to. However, you can get books from the library. You can check these books out. I've done it. So everybody is relying on internet sources. I need to see that you can open a book and, I need to see that you can open a book and that you can find information in that book to support your argument also. Use your index, look for keywords that, so if we're looking at, I don't know, here's Karen Cox's book again. The subtitle of this book is How the South Was Created in American Popular Culture. So if we're talking about film in popular culture in the South, well then that's not necessarily what this whole book is about. But if you're doing research on film or even a particular film, look up film in the index. I know this sounds remedial, but not everybody realizes that. And not everybody's had to do this kind of work before. So use the index. I just opened up to a random page, and that just so happens it's on film. It's in the F's. And there's a whole section on film and culture of reconciliation, which has a ton of subheads. There's in here, there's the title Gone with the Wind. There's another film, Hallelujah, which I'm not familiar with. There's a film called Joan of Ozark. So, you don't have to read the whole book. Nobody wants you to. I do not want you to spend all your time reading full books to write an 8 to 10 page research paper. You have to be able to do research smartly, intelligently. So use your index, look at the tables of contents of books. I know, again, you can't get into the library, into the stacks, but we have those research librarians. Alex can help you there. And oftentimes online, even if you go to, say, Amazon, let's say you find a book in the Ole Miss course catalog, or not course catalog, library catalog, and you want to know more about this particular book, it seems like something that might work. You can look it up in Amazon, and then Amazon will show you like what the table of contents is. Oftentimes you'll be able to see the index. Google Books, you can get whole books there. And I count a Google book as a book source, okay? Because you can read the whole thing online pretty much for some books. My point is, though, I don't want people relying so much just on internet sources. I need to see that you can look up using databases in the University of Mississippi's website. And I need to see that you can look up a book and find a book and use that book to support your argument, okay? Or to do the work it needs to do. And we'll talk about this in a second. Okay. I wanted to mention organization. Use your outlines. We're going to write outlines again, especially for a longer paper. You absolutely need to use an outline. So we're going to use those outlines. Feel free. I want you to be able to have your outline, and as you write, adjust your thinking. Don't be so strict that you're like trying to just fit things into where you've already created this outline. I need you to be able to go where your research takes you. But then adjust that outline. Keep working with your own outline so you know what this paper is doing, because you've got 8 to 10 pages. That's a lot of text. So if you keep adjusting your outline, you will see that this paper is working, doing what you need it to do, rather than just kind of meandering all over the place, right? That it's telling the story in a logical way, whether that's chronologically or by use of various components discussing, which I'll talk about again in a second. But yeah, think about how you're telling this story. I want people to work on their thesis statements a little bit better. And at first, you've got this thesis statement that this is what this paper will prove. But as you write, you might find that, wait, I need to tweak this thesis statement so it's more accurate to what I'm actually saying in this paper. Okay. So work on your thesis statements. That's something you can absolutely at the very end look at that thesis statement again and think, is that what I'm trying to do? Is that what I'm doing in this paper? One really great thing that I want you to do is, once you tell us what you're doing in this paper, I want you to tell us how you're going to do this. So introductions in longer papers can be more than one paragraph. So you can have your thesis statement. This is, this is what I intend to show you, right? And I intend to show you this by looking at these things, okay? Yeah. And I'll go back to this in a second because I'm going to talk about this paper. And the last thing I'll mention, two things, is I want people to proofread your papers a little bit better. We still need to work on capitalization. We've got a lot of capitalization problems, people capitalizing just random words, okay? If you're not sure if something needs to be capitalized, look it up in the dictionary. It will show you, it will say, if it doesn't say anything and it's just printed there, lowercase, then it needs to be lowercase. If it's a common noun, that means it's not a proper name, it should be lowercase. If it's the name for something, and the blues is not a proper noun, okay? Blues is a kind of music, right? Chicago blues, well, the word Chicago is a proper noun. Blues is still a common noun. So Chicago would be capitalized. Blues would not. Okay, work on our grammar, and I want to work on our punctuation. And I may give you some quizzes in between now and when we're done, just to kind of remind you of what we're talking about. And the next thing I want to say, and then we'll move on, is I need everybody to start using the Writing Center. As far as I know, no one has gone to the Writing Center. I am going to ask you to have one consultation with the Writing Center that's required for this last paper. But these guys are really good at what they do, and they will go through your paper line by line with you if you want, and you can do it online. Of course, you can email them your paper and they will respond to whatever it is that you think you might have problems with in this paper. So if it's citing sources, you can tell them, I really am still struggling with citing my sources. Can you help me with that? And they will send you back a report on your paper. Be sure that when you do send your paper in, either way, that you send them the prompt for this final paper, so they know what your paper is supposed to be doing. Okay, so that's what I think you're doing well, and some things to work on, of course. But I think, a lot of people's writing style is really good and really sophisticated, so I'm happy about that. Let me move on to this Marie Laveau paper. I'm going to share my screen with you. Here we are. Okay, I just want to say a few things about this paper that you guys read for homework. And you may have read the other one as well. You may have responded to the other one. I'm just going to use this one as the example. So I want you to have a good title. I want you to tell us, you know, what this paper is going to be, what is it about, and then use something descriptive to kind of give us more information about how you're going to look at Marie Laveau. What about Marie Laveau? What is this paper about? And this is about the queen who commodified voodoo in New Orleans. That's what this is about. Okay, so, and you've seen this, so I won't go too in depth with it. All right, but here's our thesis. And theses can be, you know, they can even be more than one sentence. But here, her thesis is: the commodification of voodoo in New Orleans is a direct result of Marie Laveau's reign as queen and the legacy she left on the city. That is what she is going to tell us in this paper. She's going to show us how voodoo in New Orleans has been commodified. It's not just a religion anymore. It's something that you can sell and buy and take a tour of. You know, you can take it home with you. You can take it back to Cincinnati. You know, and you don't have to have any, you don't have to practice religion. You can walk into Marie Laveau's on Bourbon Street and pick up a trinket that was made in China and take it home with you. And you'll have a little voodoo doll, right? So that's not the way voodoo has always worked, though. It used to be a religion, and it still is. All right, but that's what she's going to show us. Okay. So again, the commodification of voodoo in New Orleans is a direct result of Marie Laveau's reign as queen and the legacy she left on the city. So what she's going to do, our author, is going to show us how Marie Laveau is responsible for voodoo being commodified. And you've read the paper. If you haven't, read it. It's excellent. This was written for my class, for this class. I think this is a very good paper. Okay, so she builds on her work. She starts at the beginning. She builds her paper chronologically. So she starts with this topic sentence. Before the examination of Marie Laveau, it is important to first understand the history of voodoo and its journey to New Orleans. And that's what this paragraph is all about. This paragraph is going to talk about how voodoo came to New Orleans. Okay? And she includes good, specific information. She has the origin myth of voodoo, and she has found this in a particular source, rabbits. Okay, so she's got her topic sentence. Everything after that topic sentence, you can just say, for example, the history of voodoo and its journey to New Orleans. Voodoo begins with a story of when God lived on earth with his servant LIBA in their vegetable garden. And she tells the story. The story goes. All right. So the author does this again and again and again. I do want to show you that, and I've already done this, so I'm not going to belabor this point. Here is the author. Here is the page number of the book in which she found this information. I want you to cite your sources. I'm not seeing people citing their sources quite well enough yet. So let's say here, in this paragraph, you will find that Herbon wrote a book. Our author is citing the source for this information, which she found on page 13 of this book. She is giving us more information that she needs to cite, and that information was found on page 14. We do not need his last name here, his or her last name here, because we can assume that it's still this same source, right? Now, Carolyn Long wrote an article called Spiritual Merchants, which is being cited here. She cites 2 different articles by Karen Long, or an article in a book. That's why this is here, because we need to know which one of those 2 she is citing. And then she cites the same article here, but it's on page 22. Now, here's what I was talking about earlier. According to voodoo historian Jerry Gandolfo, voodoo in the most basic terms is a religion of dance. So if you were just to say, according to Jerry Gandolfo, voodoo in the most basic terms is a religion of dance, we would not know why we should trust Jerry Gandolfo. We have no idea what his background in voodoo is whatsoever. But now, because the author has included, according to voodoo historian, we know that Gandolfo is a voodoo historian. All right, so that is helpful to letting us know that this person knows what he's talking about. Okay. All right. This topic sentence, it's very basic. The first African slaves arrived in the French colony of Louisiana in 1719. This topic sentence, alerting the reader that this paragraph is alerting the reader that this paragraph will discuss African arrival in Louisiana. That's it. And then it goes on to just do that, right? And so here is that what I was trying to tell you earlier. According to Gandolfo, well, we already know who Gandolfo is. So you don't have to say voodoo historian, Jerry Gandolfo, just say Gandolfo. All right. And in that case, it is there are no page numbers, so there's no page numbers here. Long would be the next source cited. Okay. This I will want to show you. This is a good use of a partial quote. That's really the best way to use your quotes, is weave it into your own sentence. It is in this cottage that Marie held services, gave consultations, and dispensed gree-gree. Close quote. This is how you want to use your quotes. This is really the best way to do it. You may have longer quotes, but this really is, they both work. This works within your own sentence though. It's just better writing. Okay, and you'll see that she does this again and again, the author. Voodoo then, quote, enjoyed great popularity in New Orleans, so on and so forth. All right, according to historian Robert Talent, and so forth. And you'll see again, partial quote from his book. All right, I want y'all to take a good look at how this paper is written, because this is a very good paper. And it's a very good paper because it's doing something, it's looking at voodoo. She's not just giving us a report on voodoo. She's not just giving us a report on Marie Laveau. She's not just giving us a report on contemporary voodoo. She is creating a new argument. She is saying, looking at voodoo in a new way. So she's taking Marie Laveau and voodoo and the commodification of voodoo in the contemporary time. So she's taking these various components and putting them together to create a new idea, a new way to talk about the subject. And that's what I want you to do. So she's looking at a particular person in a particular place and some new way of looking at those people, some circumstance within the realm of their existence. Okay? So it's not just a report. She's arguing something and she's going to show us something. And the only way that she is able to do that is that she has done her research and she has picked up on this idea along the way that as she did her research, she discovered that, wait a minute, I can see through the history of this person how X has occurred, because Marie Laveau was a business person, and you'll see that as you've read this essay. And if you haven't read this essay, please do. But you'll see that she shows that Marie Laveau was a very powerful business person who began to sell her her product. And she turned voodoo from just something that people were worshiping and were practicing as a religion into something she could commodify and sell, which she shows how that has translated into what we're doing today. Okay, so look at that. I think it's really, really, really good, and I think you will too. All right, I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about your final research papers. This is what we're going to be doing for the next few weeks. Let me find prompt. Okay. Okay, here's the prompt. All right, so bear with me. This is it, this first one page, and I'm going to put it on Blackboard, but let me discuss it with you. For this assignment, you will, and I'm going to read this just because. For this assignment, you will form a research question or a thesis based on some aspect of Southern culture. Fix that, sorry. You will research and analyze primary and secondary sources on your topic, then synthesize that information into your paper to either answer a question or support a thesis. Okay, this is important. A paper from a research question is, how or why did X event in Southern history happen? Why does something happen? Think about it like this. I've always wondered about X, and I don't know the answer to the question. So I'm going to do some research, and I'm going to tell you the answer that I've come up with. That based on all of this information, this is the conclusion that this is the question I have, right? Let's go find the answer. And that's a wonderful way to write a paper like this, because most of the time, well, here. So the second, or the thesis-driven paper, is this paper will show that X, right? But we don't always have these great ideas already floating around in our heads to be able to say, I've always thought that this is the case, and I'm going to show you what I've always been thinking. Essentially, what we do is ask a question and then show what the answer is. Those things can be the same thing, though. You can just mentally say, I've always wondered this, I'm going to go find the answer to that. By the time you get to the end of your writing, you've got the answer, and you can create a thesis statement out of that. So don't start with your thesis statement that I'm going to show you X, because oftentimes you think X is right. And the more research you do, either you can't find real evidence to support what you think, or you find that the opposite or some alternative is true. So you can't start with X. Start with, I'm going to do research on this topic. And as I do my research, I'm going to come up with some claim that I can support, which means you have to do a lot of research before you can even consider writing even your outline. You need to know what you're writing your paper on, but not what you're going to argue. Okay, I hope this makes sense. You want to think about Southern hospitality, right? Well, what about it? I don't know. Start doing research on Southern hospitality, and you may find, or you will find, that your research question comes out of that research. So let your research be your guide, okay? Okay. So your paper cannot simply be the history of the Civil War. We are not doing reports. You're writing either a research question-based paper or a thesis-based paper. There's nothing new to explore in the history of the Civil War. There are whole libraries written on the history of the Civil War. Okay. Neither is there anything new to be understood in the statements, grits are gross, that is just your opinion, or free trade is anti-American. That too would be an opinion. Okay. These are opinions. You may not merely discuss the differences between two things. You need to examine your topic in a way that helps your reader understand your topic in a new and deeper way. Remember, picking a topic that you're interested in is so much more helpful than writing a paper about something you couldn't care less about. So write your paper, pick a topic, pick your topic on something you want to know more about. Otherwise, it's just another assignment that will be grueling and you probably won't do very well. But if it's something you really want to know more about, you'll be more than happy to spend time doing the research and just thinking about it, okay? All right, so go beyond simple pro and con type arguments. Try not to become a victim of tunnel vision, which means you're focusing so hard on what you're going to argue that you don't let the thesis develop on its own as a result of your research and knowledge, which is what I was saying earlier. The best way to find a suitable topic or thesis is to do good research. That is, let your topic take you where it needs to go. And to explore topics within topics. Ask why or so what. If you don't think you have enough fuel for an 8-page paper, you might want to rethink your topic or your thesis. If you have trouble with your topic or thesis or topic or research on that topic, talk to me. Or you can talk to me always. But you can also work with the Writing Center on that as well. They can help you develop a thesis. I'm not going to pick your topic for you. I'm not going to do your research, but we can do some research together, just online like this, through Zoom. These papers should be interesting and thought-provoking for both of us. Teach me something. Convince me that your point of view is valid and meaningful, but stay away from strong personal opinions in these papers. This is not an opinion paper. This is an academic research paper. You may agree with what you're going to say, and I hope you do. But it's not based on opinion. It's based on fact and based on things you found through research. Okay. Let's see here. I want you to come up with an original claim, much like what she did with Marie Laveau. I had never read that before. She came up with that on her own through some conversations that we did have in class. But through conversation, the more you talk about, this is the kind of stuff you can talk about with your roommate. So I've got a paper I've got to write. I'm not sure what I want to write about. Y'all have a conversation. And the more you talk about things, the more, the deeper your thoughts will get on the topic. Okay. These essays need to be between 8 and 10 pages long, not including your works cited page. It must conform to MLA formatting guidelines, which means that your text must be 12-point Times New Roman with 1-inch margins. Double spaced, good title, your name on your paper, okay? The date, I want it to say final draft, I want it to say LIBA 102, whatever section we're in, and then final draft. But put your name on your paper. I know you're turning these in online. Put your name on your paper. All right, a minimum of 7 sources. All right, you can read the rest of this paragraph, but as we get to the end here, it says in bold, internet sources can only be used if they are from credible websites, and we can talk about that individually. We've already done some conversation about this. If you're going to use well, let me finish this. A maximum of 2 websites will be allowed. 2. This means you need to be able to do good research in the library on their website. That doesn't count as a website. You are using that, it's a database. Okay. So you are looking up journal articles, newspaper articles, magazine articles. You're finding books through the University of Mississippi's website. 2 websites, no more. So that means at least 5 of your sources need to be books, journal articles, newspaper articles, or magazine articles. There's no exception to that. If you have questions about any of that, let me know, and we can talk that through. Okay. What you will turn in between now and then is your detailed outline. I'm going to ask you to write a paper proposal, which says, this is what I think I want to write my paper on, and this is, we've done this, and this is what how I think I'm going to argue it. I'll ask you to include annotated bibliographies there too. But these are things, this is how my paper is shaping up. This is what I want to show you. You're going to do a first draft, turn that in. You will have a consultation with the Writing Center, and I need to see documentation that that has happened. And then you will have your final draft. Okay. And I'm going to give you this prompt, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can write these papers. These are papers that were written for this particular class. Okay. This is the title of one of them. Helplessness, Wilting Flowers, and the Old South. The Role of Southern Women at Home During the Civil War. Okay. So we know just by reading the title what this paper is going to be about. In this paper, the author argues that white women during the Civil War, characterized by Southern hospitality, the cultivation of beauty, and a flirtatious yet chaste demeanor, were not as innocent and helpless as modern mythology indicates. That not every white woman during the Civil War, every white Southern woman during the Civil War was some Southern belle who relied on, the men of the house, so forth, to do everything for her. That's kind of a mythology that exists out there in the world. As it turns out, oftentimes when men would go off to the war, all of the men on a farm or a larger plantation, or just in a household, would leave to go off to the war, and the women were left to carry on all of those duties that had been carried out by the men before they left for war. And so what this paper shows is that how that work falls on the shoulders of women, and women were able to do these jobs. In fact, there are books written on how people who owned slaves in antebellum South, oftentimes when they would go off to war, the women were in charge of running a plantation. And as it turns out, oftentimes the women were more ruthless and vicious than the men had been. And they were more violent. So that's what this author was showing in this paper. Okay, so her thesis was just that. That's essentially the thesis. And then within the introduction, she tells us a little bit about how she's going to argue this. She gives us some 4 examples briefly, and then she goes into her paper. And then it's like, here's an example, whole paragraph. Here's an example, whole paragraph. Here's another example. It's a really good paper. Here's another one though, a different kind of paper. The Mississippi Delta, the third world of the United States, ? In this paper, the author compares the Mississippi Delta to third world countries in terms of education, poverty, and disease, and explains the cause of this close correlation despite the Mississippi Delta being part of the United States of America, the richest country in the world. So what this author did was, the more we talked about the Mississippi Delta, she started to see these disparities between the Delta and the rest of the country and how poor the Delta is related to the rest of the country, related to the rest of the South. And she wanted to find out why that was true. She started looking at some of the problems in the Delta, and it's where I'm from. She started looking at some of the educational problems. She started looking at the problem of poverty, and problems with healthcare. And she made some connection that, it could be, she thought, perhaps it could be classified as a third world country because it has a lot of the same third world problems. So what she does is, let me find my little chart here. What she does is she looks at those three things. She looks at education, poverty, and disease. And so if you have, there's a criteria that has to be met or failed to meet for a country to be considered a third world country. That is an actual designation. And it has to fail to meet various criteria. The ones that she looks at and compares, and this is a comparison paper, she looks at education, poverty, and disease in the Mississippi Delta, and she compares that to what it would mean if what that data fails to meet where third world countries are concerned. And she sees that in her research, that if you compare the data for levels of education between Mississippi Delta and third world countries, you'd find that they were pretty comparable. If you were to compare poverty in Mississippi Delta and third world countries, you would find that the levels of poverty are comparable, as well as healthcare or lack thereof in these two specific places. So she compares these and sees that if you take the Mississippi Delta on its own, not being part of the United States, it would be considered the same. It would be considered a third world country. All right, so our introduction looks at the Mississippi Delta and third world countries, and she states her thesis. She says, I will be looking at these three criteria: education, poverty, and disease, or lack of healthcare. And her first paragraph essentially discusses education in the Mississippi Delta and gives some data on that. Her third paragraph is education in third world countries and presents data on that and shows that these two are connected or similar. Then there's a paragraph on poverty in the Delta, a paragraph on poverty in third world countries, including data, and then follows that with healthcare in Mississippi Delta and healthcare in third world countries, including data. So this isn't chronological, but she takes components of it, makes comparisons. And so you'll see here that she's got, say, 8 good paragraphs or more. And so she's really, and so her conclusion is what I've already mentioned. But really what she's doing is she's writing, essentially 6 paragraphs. And so it really kind of takes all the mystery out of it. It's like, okay, I can write an introduction, which is usually something you write toward the end anyway. But I'm going to focus on education in the Mississippi Delta, keeping in mind what it is that she's trying to compare between this third world country designation in the Mississippi Delta. So you're not comparing apples and oranges, you're comparing this similar thing to this similar thing, these two similar things, and comparing them to see how that works. Level of education, and so forth. So you'll see that this is not a chronological story she's telling, but it's more sociological. and comparative. But this is an original idea. This is something that she came up with on her own. All right. Let me go back to this prompt. And so now that you've seen that, I'll go through these a little more quickly. Tightening of the Bible Belt, the social, cultural, and political role of religion in the 21st century South. So this person's looking at social, cultural, and political roles. 3 different roles. The author investigates whether religion in the South plays a larger social, cultural, and political role in the lives of Southerners today than ever before. The author takes a historical approach to the subject, comparing and contrasting sample examples from the past and the present, and comes to a well-reasoned conclusion. Okay? Could also do the same thing with contemporary social, cultural, and political roles of religion in the South and compare that to other regions outside of the South. All right. The next one is the war and the university, the lasting effects of the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement on the University of Mississippi. And the author attempts to draw parallels between the effects of the Civil War on the University of Mississippi's campus and the riots that accompanied the integration of the University of Mississippi, discussing how those events shaped the university and how the effects of those events are still evident today. Okay, so looking at 2 different things in this particular place, showing how those events, those 2 different events, shaped this university. How did the Civil War shape the university? How did the Civil Rights Movement change this place? Okay, so that's just 2 big chunks of your paper right there, right? What happened with the Civil War, how it changed the university, what happened with the Civil Rights Movement on this campus, how it changed the university, and then looking at how we still see that affecting how the university works today. So before you know it, you need to start cutting back because you've written too much, which is not a bad problem to have. So we are bringing seemingly disparate things, 2 things that aren't the same, bringing them together within the same conversation to create a new idea. Okay, civil rights and Civil War on the University of Mississippi's campus. 2 different things. They're tied in through the university. That's the thread that runs through both of them. How can we put them together and talk about them in the same conversation? Okay, Pentecostalism, still the South's religion, question mark. The author seeks to understand why the Pentecostal religion is among the fastest growing religions in the world. The author also discusses at length the religion's Southern roots and how these roots are still present in the religion today. And I think that's where it gets kind of original, regardless of where it's practiced. So I think that's where this paper really is original. Okay, a couple more. Vietnamese Americans, above and beyond in the South. The author, who was a first-generation Vietnamese American in my class at the University of Mississippi, she wanted to know, she had never really found out, never had this conversation with her parents or grandparents, how you get from South Vietnam to the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. What were some of the push factors that made them leave Vietnam, and what were some of the pull factors that brought them to this particular place? So the author sought to understand why Vietnamese immigrants migrated to the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and she used her own family as a model for that immigration experience. So this was very personal, but it's all based on research. She did research to find out what was going on when her family was immigrated here. And it was very important to her. It was something that she still probably thinks about today because she learned a lot of her own family history by doing this work. I think that's really important because it was something she really wanted to do, and it turned out really, really well. And she found out the answers to those questions. Okay. Babies everywhere. Teenage pregnancy in the South. The author argues that three things, argues three things: the lack of education, the lack of, or the presence of poverty, and cultural, and well, kind of four things. And cultural and religious attitudes in the South exacerbate the problem of teenage pregnancy in the region. So she starts off with the question, essentially, why is teenage pregnancy a bigger problem in the South when this is also a very religious place? So you've got these seemingly contradictory things here. How do those things work in concert to come up with this outcome? And so these are the things, through her research, she discovered these are some of the reasons why: education, poverty, cultural and religious attitudes. Those are some of the reasons. So she just kind of deconstructed those reasons and showed why that is the case. And then the Marie Laveau, we've already talked about that. And then this last one is the Ghosts of Roanoke, facts and fictions behind the haunting of William Faulkner's house. Roanoke is supposedly haunted, and she wanted to know if it's really haunted. Now, of course, there's no real way to understand if it is, or to know if it is or if it isn't. But she did research and based her investigation on research. And based on her research, she came to the conclusion that, I forget which way it went. But she kind of tells the story of the haunting of Roanoke based on research, looking at a particular problem: William Faulkner's house, and the haunting of William Faulkner's house, and putting those three things together and trying to figure out, what's going on there. Okay, so these are some things. This is how this paper is written. You take seemingly disparate things that don't necessarily work together, and you put them together, and you figure out how they're connected and why. Okay? So what I want you to do for homework is I will have a discussion board thread going, and I want you to do some brainstorming. I want you to kind of think about what you would like to write about, some of the questions about that topic that you would like to try and answer, and then just kind of free write on your discussion board. And I think if everybody shares their ideas, we will be kind of like in a classroom setting where people are going, oh, wait, that makes sense. That spurs me on to think about my topic in a certain way or in a new way. So I will get that going. And that's what I want you to do for homework, is a brainstorming session. And then we'll figure out what, we'll kind of pare those down. We can do that via Zoom or email or whatever. We'll figure that out. But then we'll get your topic working, and we'll get you doing your research. And then you will gather your materials. You'll gather your research together. Some you will never use, some you'll throw away, and some will be important in you coming up with this new idea. All right, and we'll do it together. But we're going to start doing this together by doing this brainstorming session. All right, that's it. Let me know if you have any questions or you just want to talk about any of this. If you want to do some brainstorming before you even write anything down for the class, that's fine too. And remember, the Writing Center can help with all of this. It's free, and they are sitting there waiting for you to make them have a good day because they helped you. All right, thanks y'all. Let me know if you need anything.